What will the royal family do now after the Queen's funeral, and when is King Charles's coronation? Life for the royal family has been one of private grief since the death of the Queen at Balmoral on September 8th. Royal engagements and visits at the core of the monarchy's work to support the voluntary and civil sector have been postponed. Royal mourning continues for a week after national mourning, but royal duties will resume again as King Charles, the Queen Consort and the new Prince and Princess of Wales adjust to their new roles. But what will the next few days, weeks, months and years look like for the royal family? We'll have all you need to know. Also on the programme, behind the scenes, images of royal guards resting between lying in state shifts have been shared by the Ministry of Defence on the day of the Queen's funeral. Beefeaters and yeoman warders guarded the Queen's coffin as hundreds of thousands of mourners visited Westminster Hall to pay their tributes to the nation's longest reigning monarch. Alongside the gentlemen at arms and the Royal Company of Archers, the yeomen of the guard stood vigil by the sovereign's coffin as she lay in state. Royal history echoes in St George's Chapel ahead of the Queen's burial. It was a privilege to walk through St George's Chapel this morning, replicating the exact path the Queen's coffin will take in just a few hours' time before she's buried there, from our reporter. And Queen Rania of Jordan has deemed the late monarch the Queen of the world as she hailed her warm personality and her remarkable legacy. Speaking fondly of Queen Elizabeth II, she told STV News that London is the only place she would want to be right now following such a monumental event, with the Queen's death marking an end of an era.
This is STV News at 10 with Stephen Woolridge.
Good evening. Life for the royal family has been one of private grief since the death of the Queen at Balmoral on September the 8th. Royal engagements and visits at the core of the monarchy's work to support the voluntary and civil sector have been postponed. Royal mourning continues for a week after national mourning ends, but royal duties will resume again as King Charles, the Queen Consort and the new Prince and Princess of Wales adjust to their new roles. So here's how the next few days, weeks, months and years could look for King Charles and the royal family. So the royal period of mourning will continue for another 7 days after Her Majesty's funeral on Monday, September 19th. During this period, the royal family won't do any public engagements unless the King gives his express permission. For example, Princess Anne carried out engagements during the family's official mourning period for Prince Philip in 2021. The King has been touring the 4 nations of the United Kingdom in the week after his mother's death, and is likely there will be a great many more engagements across the country away from London to give the public, so used to their Queen, a chance to meet members of the royal family in their new roles. So when could King Charles's coronation be, and what might it look like? So the Queen's coronation on a wet day in June 1953 was 18 months after her accession following her father's death on February 7th, 1952. There is unlikely to be such a long wait before King Charles's coronation, but the logistics of a coronation for the first time in 69 years will require detailed planning, and is thought the event, overseen by the Earl Marshal, is responsible, and it will not be before spring 2023. There are several factors that will influence the date, including the weather and cost of living crisis. Amid rising inflation and the soaring cost of energy bills, it will have to weigh up whether spending money on a coronation would be a popular decision among the public, counting every penny. Now, a question that many people keep asking is, could the Queen Consort that is, become Queen? As the wife of the King, Camilla is technically Her Majesty the Queen, and while she may yet be referred to as Queen, she will still be continued to be referred to as Queen Consort. The question of whether the royal households will ever refer to Camilla as the Queen rather than Queen Consort is one for the future, the King's spokesman has said. Camilla, the Queen Consort for now, will be crowned at Charles's side at his coronation, just as the last Queen Consort, the Queen Mother, was. She is expected to wear the Queen Mother's 1937 coronation crown. So when will the first overseas tour be? Royal overseas tours are months in the planning, but after the Queen's death, it is likely the royal household will need to redraw itineraries. One of the focuses of King Charles's reign will be the future of the Commonwealth, and it is predicted the first big royal tour will be to one of the 14 countries where the British monarch remains the head of state. There were reports back in July that the then Prince Charles would visit Bangladesh, India and Pakistan on an autumn tour. Bangladesh's Foreign Minister Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen reportedly told journalists in July, "Prince Charles has just told me he would like to visit Dhaka. I requested him to visit Sylhet. He has consented to my request." Whether the now King will still go, or whether he will now send his son Prince William and Princess Catherine in their capacity as the Prince and Princess of Wales, is unknown. Perhaps the new King will visit Canada, Australia, New Zealand or the Caribbean, where nations, including Jamaica, have made no secret of wanting to break from the crown to become republic. The Queen's first overseas trip after being crowned started in Bermuda in November 1953, travelling by air, sea and land to Jamaica, Fiji, Tonga and on to Australia and New Zealand, accompanied by her late husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. After leaving Australia in April, they visit Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, Aden, now part of Yemen, Uganda and Malta. The royal couple's final stop was Gibraltar 6 months after they left Britain. Will 73-year-old King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla be planning a similarly epic tour? That will remain to see. But what part of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex play in the reign of King Charles? Prince Harry and his wife Meghan chose to break away from the royal family and begin a new life in California. The resulting fallout from their decision to step away as working roles lead to tension between the Duke's father, King Charles, and his brother, the Prince of Wales. But the royal brothers have shown a united front in the wake of Granny's death, marking a surprise joint appearance with their wives to greet members of the public and view floral tributes at Windsor. The brothers also walked side by side behind the Queen's coffin during the Lion in State procession from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall. Whether this grows into a deeper reconciliation or is a tribute to their much-loved grandmother remains to be seen. Now the big question is, what will Prince Andrew's role be in a modern royal family? The Duke of York was stripped of his military affiliations and royal patronage and was no longer able to be referred to as His Royal Highness, in any official capacity by the Queen earlier this year. Prince Andrew reached an out-of-court settlement with Virginia Giuffre, who has brought a case of battery and intentional infliction on emotional distress against the Duke in the civil sex assault case filed in the US in March 2022. The accession of King Charles to the throne elevated Prince Andrew to one of the councillors of state positions, the first 5 people in line of succession over the age of 21. But the king could remove his brother from the position along with Prince Harry, as he does not live in the UK, from the role as of the councillors of state, who are essentially stand-ins for the monarch if they become unable to perform duties. While the monarch has the power to reshuffle the 5, Parliament have to approve the move. But what will the royal family look like under King Charles? The king has made no secret of wanting a slimmed-down monarchy to reduce costs, with less flamboyance and more focus on the role of head of state, adapting to changing public opinions. In one version of a slimmed-down monarchy, you have a narrower number of people living off the public purse. He has a vision of that being the direct line of succession rather than all the cousins and aunts, a friend of the king told the Financial Times. Now, behind the scenes, images of the royal guards have been resting between line and state shifts and have been shared by the Ministry of Defence on the day of the Queen's funeral. Beefeaters or yeoman warders guarded the Queen's coffin as hundreds of thousands of mourners visited Westminster Hall to pay their tributes to the nation's longest reigning monarch. Along the gentlemen at arms of the Royal Company of Archers, the yeomen of the guard stood vigil by the sovereign's coffin as she lay in state. Ahead of the funeral, the Ministry of Defence shared a behind-the-scenes look at the operation at Westminster Hall, with one image showing a group of yeomen resting on couches. Another image shared by the ministry shows one of the Queen's guards napping as his colleagues help each other prepare for their rotation in the historic hall. The images shared to Twitter were posted along with a message. The UK Armed Forces are continuing to honour their Commander-in-Chief of 70 years, Her Majesty the Queen, and they stand vigil along the King's bodyguard. The continuous 24-hour vigil was broken into 4 6-hour shifts, with the guards switching places every 20 minutes. Westminster Hall opened to the public at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, and mourners lined pathways around the Thames for days for their chance to say goodbye to Her Majesty. Members of the public, celebrities and foreign dignitaries were all seen queuing, including David Beckham, who spent more than 12 hours waiting. Access to the official queue had ended on Sunday night in order to meet the 6:30 a.m. closure of the Lion in State period. Crowds remained even after the doors closed and were greeted by a rainbow over Westminster Abbey. The rainbow was a moving sight, as the rainbow also appeared above Windsor Castle as the monarch's death was announced. Following a state funeral at Westminster Abbey, the Queen will be laid to rest at St George's Chapel in Windsor. Now, as the funeral has been taken its place today at Westminster Abbey and St George's Chapel, a reporter has been going around the route of which the Queen's coffin travelled, and this is what she had to say to us. It was a privilege to walk through St George's Chapel this morning. Replicating the exact coffin will take in just a few hours' time before she's buried here. As I walked up to the chapel, I was struck by a heavy scent of the flowers. The ground is covered by tributes left outside the castle ground by members of the public in recent days, and carefully placed here by castle staff. I noticed two, some official tributes, one for the Prime Minister and another the First Minister of Scotland. I think whatever religion you are or aren't, walking into a place of worship is often awe-inspiring. And this was just that. Walking into the nave, the giant west window looms behind you and the spectacular Gothic stone vaulting towers high above. This is where most of the 800 congregation will sit, including past and present members of the Queen's household. We walk through the huge organ screen into the choir, just as the King and Queen concert will do behind the coffin this afternoon. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will be there too. provoking memories, no doubt, of when they walked down the aisle under very different circumstances. I stood in front of the Kaffir flag, the platform on which the coffin will sit. It's draped in rich purple velvet. On the floor next to it I saw 8 wreaths, private tributes from members of the royal family. Notably, they were colourful, bright reds, blues and pinks, in contrast to the more subdued, formal flowers on the display. White lilies and roses with greenery picked from the grounds of Windsor Castle. Just feet away I saw the stone that marks the burial site of both Henry VIII and Charles I. If you ever needed reminding of the fact that we are today witnessing the history that our children's children will one day learn at school. We were shown the organ, which will play music by a composer who taught the young Queen to play the piano. The choir will sing the Russian Cantokian of The Departed, which was also sung for the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh. The service will be conducted by the Dean of Windsor, who knew the Queen well. She attended many services there. I think one of the most poignant memories will come when, in complete silence, the instruments of state, first the sceptre and then the orb, then the crown, are moved from the coffin and placed onto the altar, completing the circle from when Queen Elizabeth II was first crowned to now, the end of her reign. As the Dean reads his final psalm, the coffin will very, very slowly start to descend into the royal vault. Bagpipes will play, the sound gradually fading as the piper departs. The last time we saw the Queen there, in that choir, was at her husband's funeral during the pandemic, as she sat all alone. But in death, she won't be. In a private service this evening, in a tiny chapel at the north side of the main building, the Queen will be buried alongside the Duke of Edinburgh, her parents, and the ashes of her sister. And finally, Queen Rania of Jordan has deemed the late monarch of the Queen of the world, as she hailed her warm personality and her remarkable legacy. Speaking fondly of Queen Elizabeth II, she told STV News that London is the only place she would want to be right now, following such a monumental event, with the Queen's death marking an end of an era. But as Emma Murphy's full interview with Queen Rania of Jordan, Queen Rania says Queen Elizabeth will continue to inspire the next generation of the royal family.
Your Majesty, tell me what it means to you to be in London at this point.
Well, I don't think there's anywhere else you want to be at this point. I think what happened has been such a monumental event, and it is the end of an era, really. But also, it's the effect that she's had in her passing. So not only did she have an incredible impact during her lifetime, but in her passing, she has unified the country. And as I was saying, you know, I've never seen such a sense of community and unity in this country as I see today. People put all their differences aside and they came together and remembered what is most important, which is that they're all unified in their love for their country and their monarch. And it has been humbling, really, to see that impact and to see all those people lining up in the streets. Nobody's asking them to do that. They're doing it out of their own volition because they love their queen and they deeply appreciate everything she's done for them, and they're coming to pay their respects. And it's been done in such an orderly and dignified and elegant fashion that it makes everybody so proud. Everybody who's here should be proud to be British, and everybody who's watching should be proud of the British people. And honestly, it's maybe it's sad time, but it's also a time that I think has given people confidence that the foundations that Her Majesty laid for this country are extremely strong and resilient, and they will survive any difficulty. And I know the country has been facing some difficult times over the past few years, but this is a time to realize that, you know, you're going to come out of this stronger at the other end because the foundations are really there.
In terms of your memories of the time you spent with the Queen, what stands out for you?
You know, what stands out for me is how despite being the most important person in the room, she always made you feel like you're the most important person in the room, you know. And she just had a very gentle and subtle way around her. You know, her elegance wasn't just in her appearance, but it really was in the way she lived her life and the way she conducted herself around other people. She always made you, she always disarmed you, because she knew that that anybody around her is going to be feeling a sense of deep awe and maybe a bit of panic when they meet Her Majesty. So she always disarmed you by looking you in the eye, by giving a gentle smile, by just, you know, a little bit of a teasing joke. You know, she always somehow made you feel comfortable around her. And she was very empathetic and always focused on the person in front of her. You know, how are they feeling? How can I make them feel more comfortable? So I just have the most wonderful memories of her, and throughout the years, every time I met her, I felt she was warmer and warmer, you know, and would give. She doesn't ever presume that you want her advice, but she's always very generous when you ask for it, and so she always gave a guiding hand, and always gave just direction, and I really looked up to her. To me, she is the queen of the world. She might be the queen of England, but I think symbolically she's queen to all of us.
You, as a member of a royal family, will know how difficult it is to live life in the spotlight. In terms of the family here, how difficult is it for them to grieve in such a public way, and how much support does seeing the people out on the streets actually bring?
Well, you know, my heart does go out to King Charles and to the rest of the royal family members, because I know how difficult it is to have to contend with a personal loss and the grief that comes with it, and at the same time assume such a huge responsibility. And so I know that maybe for him, I don't know how much time he's had to grieve his mother's loss, and so we went through that. You know, back in '99, my husband, when we lost our King Hussein, it was such a difficult time for us, but at the same time there was such a big responsibility ahead of us that trying to balance between the two is not easy. But I can tell you that seeing the empathy and the respect and just the way the people have shown up, I think they can draw a great deal of strength from that. It makes all the difference in the world in them being able to move on into the next phase.
And that next phase obviously is a huge change for the King and the Queen Consort. You have that experience.
Yes,
What
we
would
have.
your suggestion be for tackling this next stage?
Well, you know, he has been preparing for this role all his life, so I think he is ready. He has what it takes. We've known King Charles for many years. We know the man that he is. You know, he's incredibly intelligent, incredibly thoughtful, a very genuine person. He knows the issues deeply and cares deeply, and everything he does from the heart. So I have no doubt the transition will be very, very smooth, and that he will assume his role, and this is the time for him. And he is the person best suited for this country at this time. And I think, you know, he's going to take Great Britain into the future, and I think you're going to come out of this stronger at the other end. I know it's been challenging, but I think the future is it's going to be tough for another couple of years, but I think it's all going to be good in the end.
And in terms of the King and obviously Prince William, who you work closely with at Earthshot,
Yes.
have you been able to speak to them in any way?
I have been able to speak to Queen Consort Camilla, and tonight we're going to be seeing King Charles and Prince William tonight and tomorrow. Yes, I mean, my heart goes out to them. It's a very difficult time. I know how much they loved her, deeply respected her, how much of a role model she was to all of them. And I think the way that they're going to sort of pay tribute to her memory is to really keep her legacy alive and to emulate her example. And she has instilled in them the most important values of a deep sense of duty, of discipline, of service for the country. And I think that they are going to follow in her footsteps in a very steady way. Every leader will leave his own mark, but I think the main principles are going to continue throughout the generations.
Your Majesty, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Safe travels to New York.
Thank you very much.
And that is tonight's STV News at 10. The Queen is now in the royal vault, where she is being buried with her beloved husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, next to her father, her mother, and her sister's ashes. The monarchy now will remain in mourning for another 7 days as we come out of national mourning. From all of us here on News at 10, good night.